Around the country, some around the world, watching what happened today. Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast is a political analyst in the Eastern Cape. He joins us now. Professor Breakfast, good afternoon to you. Firstly, this ANC event, yes, they filled the stadium. It's very important. Politically, it's very impressive. It shows good organization. Do you think the president's speech, the content of the speech, the way it was delivered, is that going to change the way anyone actually votes? Is there any message in today's speech that will change the outcome of the elections?
Thank you very much, Stephen, for having me, and compliments of the season. I don't think that the speech will influence the political behavior of the electorate, largely because I think people have made up their minds who to vote for. But also, there was nothing new in the speech, in the statement. It was the same thing that we've heard before. But I think what struck me was the fact that the president of the ANC came across to be trying to set the record straight in terms of what the government has been able to do, because there was a great deal of emphasis on the achievements of government in terms of the provision of water, health. There was a great deal of emphasis on transformation and the policies that have been introduced, like a triple BE Employment Equity Act, the Labor Relations Act, and so on. So there's nothing new on that score, but also there was an emphasis on the inclusion of young people. I think that was done on purpose, because I think there is an appreciation on the fact that young people constitute the majority of eligible voters. No wonder he had to reach out to them. But later on, as you heard, he did strike a balance in terms of, the need also to not to sideline older people in terms of employment. But of course, there was a reflection on the case that is underway at ICJ in terms of the dispute between South Africa and Israel. So by and large, there's nothing new in the statement, but I think it was just a precursor for the manifesto that will be launched, I think, next month.
Is it an indication, the idea that look at what the ANC's done over the last 30 years, look at the freedom that we've brought, look at the freedom that's actually come across, and not just based on people based on racial identities, but along gender identities, sexuality identities, etc. Does all of that, so is that an indication then that the ANC is going to be campaigning this year more on a sort of track record over 30 years, look how South Africa's changed since 1994, than almost on the way it could change South Africa in the future?
I think the ANC is well aware, Stephen, that it might be dislodged from the helm of power, even though it doesn't admit that in public, because there have been findings that have been unveiled that the ANC might be below 50%. So I think there is that appreciation, but of course it cannot say that in public. That it will be voted out of power. No wonder, in my opinion, I think the main line of argument in that statement of the president was that the electorate must renew the mandate of the ANC because the ANC is on a mission to promote transformation and so on. But I just think that the damage is done, and what is done cannot be undone. I think to think that you are going to use that to twist the electorate, I think you need to think again.
I was very interested, the president being quite politically aggressive almost on the National Health Insurance Scheme. And the ANC's been quite politically aggressive. I'm not saying they've done anything wrong. They're perfectly in their rights to vote in favour of the NHI in the National Assembly, and then to do so again. So the bill went through unchanged to the National Council of Provinces late last year. We expect court challenges. I don't think the president has signed it into law yet. But it's a classic political issue that pits the rich people with private health care against the majority, the poor, the people without private health care. The fact the president was so sort of aggressive about the NHI today, how important is that? It's surely a useful issue for the ANC.
Yes, it is, because the ANC takes pride in introducing that public policy. Given the and I'm not talking about the rightness or the wrongness of them, just explaining the context, given the fact that we've got a divide between the haves and the have-nots. But I think we need to adopt the wait-and-see approach in terms of how that policy is going to be rolled out, given the fact that we still have other challenges with regard to healthcare.
I wondered if the one thing that maybe the president could announce that would change the needle, maybe could still announce, I suppose, during the election manifesto launch next month, would be around the basic income grant. We know that so many people are dependent on the 350 rand a month, which is hardly anything. And yet that didn't happen. I mean, could it still happen? Is the ANC not going to play politics of social grants for other reasons?
Stephen, if we look at our model of development, in my opinion, I'm not trying to be controversial, but we are not a developmental state. By contrast, I think we are a welfare state. And we've got a lot of people who are dependent on social grants. And there has been an argument that has been used to garner votes. That's why I can't remember when it was, but there was an argument that if the ANC can be voted out of power, people will not continue getting those grants. So that has been used for, I would say, strategic reasons by the ANC government to garner more votes, to sort of like scare the voters that if they don't vote for the ANC, they will not be beneficiaries of those grants.
Professor, I'm going to be a little cynical, I'm afraid, and I apologize in advance, but it seems to me that both economic freedom fighters and the Democratic Alliance support the principle of a basic income grant. And the risk for the ANC would be, perhaps, if they were to say we're going to have a basic income grant of 500 rand a month, both the DA and the EFF would say we'll have a basic income grant of 1,000. I think the EFF for many years promised a bigger income grant. Is that sort of the problem for the ANC? You're the governing party. If you promise a basic income grant, everyone else is just going to promise a bigger one.
Yeah, I think there is a general historical appreciation that because of our history of land that was taken away from the majority and inequality, poverty, you have to have an anti-poverty strategy that will be like a buffer to cushion the plight of the poorest of the poor. That's why even, as you pointed out, the DA and the EFF, they support the BIG or a basic income grant. But the ANC, I think, takes pride in the fact that, it comes across to be the one that pioneered this developmental trajectory since 1994.
It's interesting you spoke about young people, and the ANC does talk about young people at various times. It talks about it in a sort of expanded January 8 statement from the NEC. The President spoke about young people as well. And isn't that really the ANC's big challenge? People who may still be living a sort of economic apartheid, I think in many cases, but don't really remember the sort of oppression of apartheid. Their parents, of course, will have told them about it. But isn't that the ANC's problem? Young voters, memories of what happened are fading.
Sorry, Stephen, for speaking up over you. Yes, that is the ANC's challenge, because one of the things that we have seen of late has been political apathy amongst the youth. A lot of young people, some think that, the struggle is over. There's no need for them to participate in politics. Others, they feel let down by the powers that be, and therefore they don't see the need for them to vote. And the interesting thing is that leads to voter turnout being low. Now, what is the meaning of that? My view is that if voter turnout is low, it affects the ANC. It affects the ANC negatively. It affects the electoral performance of the ANC. But if voter turnout is high, then it will help the ANC to do better. So the ANC is concerned about the participation of young people. That's why there was a great deal of emphasis in terms of anti-poverty strategies, which are geared towards the youth. But my view is that the issue of political apathy amongst young people is not a South African phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon due to a number of reasons, given the fact that the Soviet Union fell apart in 1989, which led to a lot of young people having a neoliberal outlook to life and espousing individualism and materialism and so on.
If young people in Britain had voted in 2016, that country wouldn't have had a Brexit, for example. I mean, there are consequences when people don't vote. It's interesting because there's another question that comes from this, Professor Breakfast, which is, does the ANC really want young people to vote? Because if young people vote, aren't many of them going to vote for the EFF?
Yes, they do, but I think the ANC has been outmaneuvered by the EFF because the EFF has been very strategic. Because if you look at the component of the EFF, I forgot the name, but the component structure of the EFF has been focusing in the main on institutions of higher learning. And that's how the EFF has been able to grow. I mean, I don't want to mention universities which are run by the youth wing of the EFF, but there are quite a number of them. So the EFF has been doing very well, and the EFF, the leadership of the EFF is very young, so they target a lot of young people. So the ANC is trying to keep up with that in terms of trying to tap into that space of young people. And like I said, I mean, the majority of people who are eligible to vote, they are young people. Therefore, the ANC is duty bound to pitch its message to that audience.
One of the issues, I mean, there are various issues that are going to be absolutely vital in this year's elections. Load shedding is one of them, and I'll come to that in a moment. The other, I think, is corruption, and surely the opposition parties are going to be trying to take the conversation to corruption as much as they can. In the expanded ANC National Executive Committee January 8th statement, they say this, it's a very simple line. They say, there will be no compromise on the fundamental matters of organizational discipline and integrity. And this, of course, takes us straight away, I think, Professor, in my view at least, to is it 95 people in the ANC who have had findings made against them or been implicated in wrongdoing by the Zondo Commission, who have not gone to the Integrity Committee of the ANC. And some of those people surely are going to go through the process to be re-elected back to Parliament, to represent the ANC in Parliament. How big an issue is this going to be?
Stephen, you've raised two important issues. The first one is the issue of power outages. The ANC has made a lot of commitments that it has not honored, and this issue in question is one of them. Because the ANC promised us that, the issue of power outages was going to be a thing of the past, and that has not happened. And there was no great deal of emphasis on that in that statement. Regarding the issue of corruption, I think it's all talk and no action. And this is something that has really dented the image of the president, because he promised the country that he was going to fight against corruption, but even himself, he has been affected by allegations of corruption, the issue of Phala Phala. And there have been other people who are aligned to his faction who were mentioned at the Zondo Commission. And we heard what Uncle Kweremantaj said, that, those findings must be put on hold, because if they are implemented, they are going to divide the party. So what is the meaning of that? It means that, in my view, that the ANC doesn't take the fight against corruption seriously.
Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, always good to hear from you. Thank you very much indeed.